You're standing on my grave. The woman didn't scream. She didn't even step back. She simply looked down at the weathered stone beneath her boots, then up at him with an expression that suggested mild inconvenience rather than terror. "How inconsiderate of me," she said, "though in my defense you don't appear to be using it." Phineas Crane had been dead for 217 years. In that time, he'd encountered every possible human reaction to his existence: fear, fascination, revulsion, worship. Dry wit at 3 in the morning in a rain-soaked churchyard was new. "Most people run," he observed. "Most people haven't spent the last 6 hours transcribing Latin epitaphs in the dark because the vicar won't let women into the church archives during daylight hours." She held up a leather journal, its pages protected by oilcloth. "I'm Maud Kettering. I'm writing a book on medieval burial practices, and you're blocking my view of the inscription on that monument." She pointed past him with her pencil. Not at him. Past him. As though he were merely an obstacle, not a creature who could drain her dry before she finished her sentence. Phineas found himself stepping aside. "Thank you." She moved closer to the monument, angling her lantern to catch the worn lettering. Her dress was practical wool, her hair pinned severely back, and she smelled of ink and rain and something else. Something that made his long dormant hunger stir uncomfortably. Not blood. He'd learned to manage that particular craving decades ago. This was different. Sharper. "You're not afraid," he said. "I'm terrified. I'm simply choosing not to show it because fear makes people stupid, and I've worked too hard on this research to die stupid." She sketched quickly, her hand steady. "Are you going to kill me?" "I haven't decided." "Well, decide quickly. I have 4 more graveyards to visit before dawn, and you're cutting into my schedule." Despite himself, Phineas laughed. The sound startled them both. Him because he couldn't remember the last time he'd done it. Her because she finally looked at him properly. Her eyes widened, not with fear but with recognition. "You're the one they whisper about. The vagrant who sleeps in the old Kettering crypt." She paused. "That's my family crypt, by the way. My great-uncle's been dead 30 years, so I doubt he minds the company. But I'm curious how you got past the iron gate." "I didn't break in, if that's what you're asking." "No, I'm asking how you opened a lock that hasn't had a key since 1802. She closed her journal. "I've been trying to get inside for months. There's a ledger in there that documents plague burials, and I need it. And you think I can help you?" "I think you already have helped yourself to my family's property, which means you owe me." She tilted her head. "I'm not fool enough to believe you're human. Your skin's too pale, you cast no shadow even in direct lantern light, and you haven't blinked once since we started talking. But you're also not attacking me, which suggests you have some measure of control, so here's my proposal. You get me into that crypt, I copy what I need from the ledger, and we both pretend this conversation never happened." Phineas stared at her. In 2 centuries, no one had ever negotiated with him. They'd begged, bargained out of desperation, offered themselves in exchange for loved ones, but this woman was proposing a simple transaction as though he were a locksmith rather than a monster. "What makes you think I want anything from you?" "Because if you wanted me dead, I'd be dead. You're still talking, which means you're either lonely, curious, or you need something only I can provide." She met his gaze without flinching. "I'm guessing it's the third option." She was right. Phineas had spent the last 3 months sleeping in the Kettering crypt because it was the only structure in the churchyard built with enough iron in its walls to suppress the dreams, the visions, the memories of everyone he'd killed, everyone he'd failed to save, 200 years of death that haunted him whenever he tried to rest anywhere else. But the iron was weakening. He could feel it. Another month, perhaps 2, and the crypt would be as useless as everywhere else. "There's a second ledger," he said slowly, "hidden behind a loose stone in the northwest corner. It documents something your family didn't want recorded in the official books." "What kind of something?" "Vampire attacks. 37 deaths between 1798 and 1802. Your great-uncle was a hunter. He tracked the creature responsible and killed it, but not before it slaughtered half the village. Phineas watched her face carefully. That ledger contains the hunter's methods, the wards he used, the iron configurations that could trap or repel our kind. Maud's expression didn't change. And you want me to copy those methods for you? I want you to tell me if there's a way to make the iron work permanently. The crypt's protections are failing. I need to know how to reinforce them. Why? The question was simple, the answer wasn't. Because I'm tired, Phineas said finally. I don't want to hurt anyone. I haven't fed from a human in 60 years. But the dreams, the memories, they make it harder to maintain control. The iron helps. Without it, I'll have to leave, find somewhere else, and eventually I'll run out of places to run. Maud studied him for a long moment. Then she opened her journal again, flipped to a blank page, and held out her pencil. Draw me a map of the crypt's interior. Mark where the iron's embedded and where it's failing. I'll need measurements. You're agreeing? I'm a historian, Mr. Crane. I don't destroy knowledge. I preserve it. If my great-uncle's work can help you stay harmless, that's a better outcome than you losing control and slaughtering the next village over. She raised an eyebrow. Though I'm adding a condition, you help me with my research. 200 years of first-hand observation of burial practices, architectural changes, social customs. You're a primary source. I want interviews. You want to interview a vampire. I want to interview someone who's lived through the periods I'm studying. Your dietary habits are irrelevant to medieval mortuary customs. Phineas took the pencil. As he sketched the crypt's layout, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not hope. He'd abandoned that a century ago. But perhaps possibility. This strange, fearless woman with her practical boots and her research journal might be the first person in 200 years who saw him as something other than a monster or a myth. There's a problem, he said as he handed back the journal. Someone else knows about the crypt. Maud's expression sharpened. Who? A collector, Horace Grimsby. He's been buying up vampire artifacts, stakes, holy water vials, binding chains. Last week he approached me in the market square, offered me money to tell him where I sleep. You didn't tell him. I told him to go to hell, but he's persistent and he's not working alone. There's a society, the Brotherhood of the Blessed Thorn. They believe vampire remains have medicinal properties. They want me alive long enough to study, then dead enough to sell. Maud closed her journal with a snap. Then we'd better work quickly. If Grimsby finds the crypt before we reinforce the wards, you'll lose your sanctuary, and I'll lose my research. Unacceptable on both counts. She started walking toward the crypt, her lantern swinging. Phineas followed, bemused. She moved through the churchyard like she owned it, stepping over graves with the confidence of someone who'd spent more time with the dead than the living. The crypt's iron gate stood closed, its lock rusted but intact. Phineas placed his palm against the metal, felt the familiar burn, and pushed. The gate swung open silently. How? Maud began. Iron burns us. But if we're willing to endure the pain, we can touch it. Most vampires won't. I've had practice. He showed her his palm. The skin was unmarked, but she could see the tension in his jaw. Does it hurt now? Always, but less than the dreams. She nodded and stepped inside. The crypt was small, barely 10 feet square, with stone shelves holding 3 coffins. The air smelled of earth and old iron. Maud set her lantern on the floor and moved immediately to the northwest corner. Here? 2 stones up, 3 stones over. She pressed against the indicated stone. It shifted slightly. She worked her fingers into the gap and pulled. The stone came free, revealing a hollow space and a leather-bound book. Maud lifted it carefully, her hands reverent. This is it, the hunter's journal. She opened it, scanning the pages. Her expression changed from excitement to concern to something harder. Phineas, this isn't just ward configurations. It's a complete methodology for capturing and containing vampires. Binding circles, starvation protocols, interrogation techniques. I know. If Grimsby gets his hands on this, he won't. That's why I need you to copy only the ward information. Then we burn the rest. Maud looked up sharply. You want me to destroy a historical document? I want you to destroy a torture manual. They stared at each other. Phineas could see the conflict in her face, the scholar's instinct to preserve warring with the human's instinct toward mercy. There are other vampires, she said finally. If this knowledge is lost, then they'll be safer. Most of my kind aren't like me, Maud. They kill, they enjoy it, but they don't deserve what's described in those pages. No one does. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll copy the wards, we'll burn the rest, but I'm keeping a record that this journal existed. Future historians deserve to know what happened here, even if they can't access the details. Agreed. Maud settled onto the floor, opened her journal, and began transcribing. Phineas watched her work, marveling at her focus. She filled page after page with careful diagrams and notes, occasionally asking him questions about iron purity or wall thickness. The work took hours. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the crypt's stone roof. There, she said finally, closing her journal. I have everything we need. The wards can be reinforced with additional iron bars set at specific angles. Your great-uncle was brilliant. He understood that it's not the amount of iron but the geometric configuration that matters. We'll need a blacksmith. I know one. He's discreet. Good. Because we have another problem. She pointed to a passage in the hunter's journal. According to this, Grimsby's Brotherhood has a way to track vampires who've touched iron recently. Something about residual magnetic signatures. If you've been opening this gate regularly... A sound outside cut her off. Footsteps, multiple sets. Phineas moved to the gate, peering through the iron bars. 3 men approached through the rain, led by a portly figure in an expensive coat. Horace Grimsby. Inside, Phineas hissed, away from the entrance. Maud grabbed her lantern and pressed herself against the back wall. Phineas pulled the gate closed, but he knew it wouldn't hold. Not against 3 men with the right tools. Mr. Crane! Grimsby's voice was jovial, as though they were meeting for tea. I know you're in there. We've been tracking the iron resonance for weeks. Clever of you to hide in a crypt, but not clever enough. Go away, Grimsby. Can't do that, I'm afraid. The Brotherhood's offering quite a sum for a live specimen. You'll be treated well, fed, housed, studied. Think of the contribution you'll make to medical science. Think of the contribution you'll make to the churchyard if you don't leave. Grimsby laughed. Empty threats. You haven't killed anyone in decades. We've done our research. You're domesticated. He nodded to his companions. Gentlemen, if you please. One of the men produced a crowbar. The other pulled out a leather satchel that clinked with the sound of glass vials. Holy water, probably. Or something worse. Phineas felt Maud move beside him. She'd set down her lantern and was holding something. The hunter's journal. Miss Kettering, Grimsby said, noticing her for the first time. How delightful. I didn't realize you were acquainted with our friend. Perhaps you'd like to step outside before things become unpleasant? Perhaps you'd like to explain why you're trespassing on my family's property, Maud replied coolly. This crypt belongs to the Ketterings. You have no legal right to be here. Legal right? Grimsby's smile widened. My dear woman, we're dealing with a monster. Legal niceties hardly apply. They apply to you. You're human, subject to human law. And I'm prepared to testify that you broke into a private crypt with intent to commit assault. She held up the journal. I'm also prepared to present evidence that you're part of an organization engaged in kidnapping and torture. Grimsby's expression hardened. Give me that book. No. Miss Kettering, you don't understand what you're protecting. That creature has killed hundreds. 217 years ago, he was transformed against his will and spent the first 50 years of his existence as a mindless predator. The next 167 years, he spent trying to atone. I've read my great-uncle's journal. I know the difference between a monster and someone trying not to be one. Maud's voice was steady. You, Mr. Grimsby, are choosing to be a monster. He's choosing not to be. I know which side of that equation I'm supporting. The man with the crowbar stepped forward. Enough talk. We're taking him. He jammed the crowbar into the gate's lock. The iron shrieked. Phineas felt the wards beginning to fail, the protective geometry disrupted by the forced entry. Maud, run, he said quietly. When they break through, I won't be able to control. Yes, you will. She grabbed his arm. The touch burned, not from iron but from something else. Life, warmth, trust. You've controlled it for 60 years. You're not going to lose it now because 3 idiots with a crowbar think they're scientists. The gate burst open. Grimsby's men rushed in. Phineas felt the hunger rise, felt the dreams pressing close, felt 2 centuries of death screaming for release. But Maud's hand was still on his arm, and her voice was still steady. The binding circle, she said. Page 47. Can you draw it? He understood instantly. Phineas dropped to the floor, his finger tracing a pattern in the dust, the same pattern Maud had copied from the hunter's journal. A circle designed not to trap vampires, but to trap humans inside a vampire's space. The geometry was precise, the angles exact. The first man stepped across the line and froze, literally froze, his body locked in place by the ward's power. What? Grimsby began. Iron configurations work both ways, Maud said pleasantly. My great-uncle discovered that the same geometric principles that repel vampires can immobilize humans if the circle's drawn inside a vampire's claimed territory. You're standing in Phineas's sanctuary. He's been sleeping here for months. By the laws of supernatural resonance, this space is his. The second man tried to retreat but found himself unable to cross back over the line. Both intruders stood paralyzed, their eyes wide with panic. Grimsby remained outside the circle, his face pale. This is illegal. You can't. I can testify that you broke into private property with intent to kidnap, Maud interrupted. I can produce a journal documenting your organization's criminal activities. I can name 3 magistrates who owe my family favors. Or, she held up the hunter's journal. You can leave now, never return, and I won't burn this book. Your choice. You wouldn't destroy it. You're a scholar. I'm a scholar who's just discovered that some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. She moved toward the lantern. I'm counting to 10. You're bluffing. 1, 2, 3. Miss Kettering. 4, 5, 6. Grimsby looked at his paralyzed companions, at Phineas standing calmly inside the circle, at Maud's unwavering expression. 7, 8. Fine, Grimsby stepped back. Release my men. Phineas? Maud looked at him. Phineas scuffed his foot across part of the circle, breaking the pattern. The 2 men stumbled forward, gasping. They scrambled out of the crypt without a word. Grimsby lingered at the entrance. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Maud said. Because tomorrow morning, I'm visiting my family's solicitor. I'm filing a formal complaint about tonight's break-in, and I'm having this crypt legally designated as a historical site under my personal stewardship. If you or your brotherhood come near it again, you'll be arrested for vandalism of protected property. You can't protect him forever. I don't need to protect him forever. I just need to protect him long enough for him to reinforce the wards. After that, your tracking methods won't work. He'll be invisible to you again. She smiled thinly. Now get off my family's property before I decide that burning this journal isn't enough and I should give it to the magistrate instead. Grimsby left. Maud waited until the footsteps faded, then sat down abruptly on the floor. Her hands were shaking. You were bluffing, Phineas said. Of course I was bluffing. I'm a terrible liar. I was absolutely terrified. She looked up at him. Did it work? You just faced down 3 men and a criminal organization with nothing but a history book and a threat. Yes, it worked. Good. Because I think I'm going to be sick now. Phineas sat beside her. After a moment's hesitation, he put his hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank me after we've reinforced the wards. And after you've given me at least 20 hours of interviews about Victorian funeral customs, and after you've helped me access 3 more family crypts that have been sealed since the 1790s. She managed a weak smile. I'm not doing this out of charity, Phineas. I'm doing it because you're useful. I'm useful. Extremely. You're 217 years old. Do you have any idea how rare that makes you? You're a walking archive. I could write 10 books just from your memories of architectural changes alone. He laughed again, twice in one night. A record. There's something else, Maud said. The journal mentioned that iron wards work better when they're maintained by someone the vampire trusts. Something about emotional resonance strengthening the geometric patterns. If I'm going to help you reinforce this place, I'll need to visit regularly, check the configurations, make adjustments. You want to be my warden. I want to be your colleague. There's a difference. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. I'll come back tomorrow night with the measurements we need. We'll hire the blacksmith, get the iron bars installed, and make this crypt impregnable. Then you can sleep without dreams, and I can access your memories without worrying that you're going to lose control and eat me. I don't eat people. Figure of speech. She picked up her journal and the hunter's book. I meant what I said about burning this, but not tonight. Tonight I'm too tired to make irreversible decisions about historical documents. I'll keep it safe until we're sure Grimsby's really gone. And if he comes back? Then we'll deal with it. Together. She paused at the gate. That's what colleagues do, isn't it? Deal with problems together? Phineas looked at this strange, fearless woman who'd negotiated with a vampire, bluffed a criminal, and offered partnership as casually as someone might offer tea. In 217 years, he'd been many things: predator, monster, wanderer, penitent, but he'd never been anyone's colleague. Yes, he said. That's what colleagues do. Maud smiled. Good. I'll see you tomorrow night then. Try not to let anyone else break into your crypt before I get back. It's bad for the wards. She left, her lantern swinging through the rain. Phineas stood in the doorway of the crypt, watching her disappear into the darkness. The iron gate hung crooked on its hinges. The binding circle was scuffed and broken. The sanctuary he'd carefully maintained for months was compromised. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't alone. He closed the gate, wedged it shut with a loose stone, and settled into his usual corner. The dreams would come. They always did. But tonight, maybe, they'd be a little quieter. Because tonight, he had something new to think about. A colleague. A partner. Someone who saw him not as a monster to be destroyed or a curiosity to be studied, but as a person with knowledge worth preserving and a life worth protecting. Someone who'd stood between him and his hunters and hadn't flinched. Phineas closed his eyes. The iron burned against his back, steady and familiar. Outside, the rain continued its endless drumming. And somewhere in the darkness, Maud Kettering was walking home with a vampire hunter's journal and a head full of plans. He found himself looking forward to tomorrow night. 3 weeks later, the crypt's wards were complete. The blacksmith had installed the new iron bars exactly according to Maud's specifications, creating a geometric pattern so precise that Phineas could feel the difference immediately. The dreams receded, the hunger quieted. For the first time in decades, he slept without screaming. Maud visited every evening, bringing questions and notebooks and an endless enthusiasm for architectural minutiae. She interviewed him about everything from medieval stone-carving techniques to the evolution of mourning customs. She took notes in 3 languages. She argued with him about the dating of specific monuments. She brought him books from the library and read passages aloud, asking for his corrections. She never asked about the people he'd killed. She never pressed him for details about his transformation. She treated his past as exactly what it was, past, and focused instead on what he knew, what he remembered, what he could teach her. It was, Phineas realized, the closest thing to friendship he'd experienced in 200 years. On the 23rd night, Maud arrived with news. "Grimsby's gone," she announced, settling onto the floor with her usual lack of ceremony. "Left the country. Apparently the Brotherhood's been dissolved. Someone leaked their membership list to the Times, and half of them have been arrested for various crimes. Kidnapping, mostly. Some fraud. One count of grave robbery. Someone leaked the list. Someone who had access to a hunter's journal that documented the Brotherhood's activities in detail." Maud's expression was innocent. "I can't imagine who that might have been." "You gave them the journal." "I gave them selected pages, anonymously. The parts about the Brotherhood's crimes, not the parts about vampire hunting methodology. The rest I burned, as promised." She pulled out her own journal. "But I kept my transcriptions of the ward configurations, for future reference. In case you need to protect another vampire. In case I need to protect you again. Or in case some other scholar 50 years from now needs to understand how iron geometry works." She looked at him seriously. "Knowledge isn't good or evil, Phineas. It's what people do with it that matters. I'm choosing to use what I learned to help someone who's trying to do good. That feels like the right choice." "It is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, autumn was settling over the churchyard. The leaves were turning, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke and approaching winter. "I've been offered a position," Maud said finally, "at the British Museum. They want me to catalog their collection of funerary artifacts. It's a good position, steady income, access to resources I could never afford on my own." Phineas felt something cold settle in his chest. "You're leaving?" "I'm considering it, but there's a problem." She met his eyes. "The position would require me to move to London, which means I couldn't maintain the wards here. They need regular attention, you know that. Without someone checking the configurations every few weeks, they'll degrade." "I could learn to do it myself." "You could, but iron burns you. It would be painful and difficult, and there's a risk you'd make mistakes." She paused. "Or I could decline the position and stay here. Continue my research independently. Keep maintaining the wards. Keep interviewing you for my book." "Maud, I'm not asking you to make the decision for me. I'm telling you that I have a choice, and part of that choice involves you. Because we're colleagues, partners, and partners consider each other when making major life decisions." Phineas looked at her, this brilliant, stubborn, fearless woman who'd changed his existence in the space of 3 weeks, who'd given him safety and purpose and something he'd thought he'd lost forever: hope. "Take the position," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Take the position. It's what you've worked for. You deserve it." He managed a smile. "I've survived 200 years. I can survive without you." "That's not the point. The point is you shouldn't have to." Maud stood, pacing the small space. "I've been thinking about this. The museum position is in London. London has dozens of old churches, hundreds of crypts, thousands of iron gates and monuments, and architectural features that need cataloging. You could come with me." "To London?" "Why not? You're not bound to this churchyard. The wards work because of the iron configuration, not the location. We could find another crypt, another sanctuary, set up the same geometric patterns. You'd have the same protection, and I'd have access to better resources for my research." She stopped pacing. "We'd both benefit." "You want me to move to London with you?" "I want my colleague to relocate to a city that offers better opportunities for both of us." Is that so strange? It was completely strange. It was also, Phineas realized, exactly what he wanted. "What about feeding?" he asked. "This churchyard is isolated. London is crowded. More people means more temptation." "London also has more rats, more stray animals, More options that don't involve humans. Maud tilted her head. Unless you're telling me you can't control yourself. I can control myself. Then what's the real objection? The real objection was that he was afraid. Afraid of hoping. Afraid of accepting something good, because 200 years had taught him that good things didn't last. But Maud was looking at him with that same steady, fearless expression she'd worn the night they met, and he found he couldn't lie to her. I don't want to be a burden, he said quietly. You're not a burden. You're an asset, a primary source, a walking encyclopedia of architectural and social history, and she hesitated, then continued. A friend. I don't have many of those. I'd like to keep the ones I have. Friend. The word settled into Phineas's chest like the iron wards. Burning, yes, but also solid, protective, real. I'll need time to prepare, he said, to make sure I can travel safely, to arrange. I don't start until January. That gives us 2 months. Maud smiled. Plenty of time to plan, and to finish the interviews I need for the first 3 chapters of my book. You're really writing a book about me. I'm writing a book about burial practices in which you feature prominently as a source. There's a difference. She pulled out her notebook. Now, I need you to describe the evolution of coffin construction between 1750 and 1800, specifically the transition from wooden pegs to metal nails. I have a theory about how industrialization affected mourning customs, and you're the only person alive who can confirm it. Phineas laughed, the 3rd time in 3 weeks, another record, and began to talk. They worked through the night, as they had every night for weeks. Maud took notes. Phineas remembered. The iron wards hummed their steady protection around them. And outside, the churchyard settled into autumn darkness, patient and eternal. When dawn approached, Maud packed her things and stood to leave. At the gate, she paused. Thank you, she said, for trusting me, for agreeing to come to London, for being the kind of person worth protecting. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth protecting. She nodded and stepped out into the pre-dawn gray. Phineas watched her go, then returned to his corner of the crypt, the iron pressed against his back. The wards held firm. The dreams were quiet. And for the first time in 217 years, Phineas Crane fell asleep thinking not about the past he'd survived, but about the future he might actually have. A future with a colleague, a partner, a friend, a future where he was more than just a monster trying not to be one. A future where he was simply Phineas, scholar's assistant and keeper of memories, living in a city full of iron and stone and endless opportunities to be useful. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't salvation. But it was something better. It was purpose. And for a creature who'd spent 2 centuries wandering in darkness, purpose was more than enough. The sun rose over the churchyard. Inside the crypt, protected by geometry and iron and the trust of one fearless historian, Phineas slept without dreams.